The Jesus we were taught is the image of serenity, the master who walks on water, multiplies bread and preaches unconditional love. This is the story we are usually told, the idealized Jesus, but the narrative is far more complex. The very same sacred texts that present the gentle Christ also unveil a figure of fierce judgment, inexplicable destruction, and sudden wrath. A Jesus who, in 3 pivotal moments, acts in ways that force us to ask, who truly was the man who challenged the conventional logic and morality of the era. Today we delve into the Gospels to unearth the 3 most unsettling and controversial actions of Jesus of Nazareth, actions that transformed lives, destroyed property, and even cursed nature itself. Stay with us, because the 3rd story, his fury in the temple, reveals the most explosive, and perhaps the most strikingly human side of the Messiah. We begin with a paradox from Mark chapter 11, a scene so baffling that scholars have debated its meaning for 2 millennia, the cursing of the fig tree. The Bible tells us that Jesus and his disciples were walking from Bethany to Jerusalem. Jesus became hungry. He sees a leafy fig tree by the roadside and approaches it, expecting to find figs. And here is the first great point of confusion. Mark's text is explicit in stating, "but found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs." Jesus must have known this. Yet the narrative proceeds with an immediate pronouncement of judgment. Jesus declares, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." The next day, they observe the fig tree completely withered, dried up from the roots. Our logical mind is immediately struck by a question of fairness. Why would a master supposedly endowed with all knowledge punish a tree for failing to do the impossible? Why utilize his divine power to destroy something inanimate for a failure that was, quite literally, natural and chronological? This action challenges our expectations of his compassion and restraint. This event is often justified as a performative parable, a visual lesson for the disciples. The fig tree, full of leaves but barren of fruit, represents the religious hypocrisy of Israel, outwardly pious but lacking genuine faith. But, we must look beyond the allegory. What does this story reveal about the nature of Jesus' power and judgment? It shows us a Jesus who is not hesitant to enact swift judgment, a judgment that does not require moral guilt, but simply the failure to fulfill its intended purpose. The power that heals the lepers is the same power that instantly takes the life of a plant. The fig tree, therefore, is not merely a metaphor, it is a stunning demonstration of Jesus' ultimate, sobering power, the power to judge and render life irrevocably barren. This initial lesson prepares us for the subsequent actions, where the damage is not merely symbolic, but real, impacting the livelihood and survival of an entire community. Our second story, narrated in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, takes us to the region of the Gadarenes or Gerasenes, an area inhabited by Gentiles where the raising of pigs was permitted and constituted the primary means of income. Jesus encounters 2 men possessed by a legion of demons, men so wild that no one dared travel that road. The encounter is dramatic. The demons beg Jesus not to send them into the abyss, but to allow them to enter a large herd of pigs grazing nearby. The Messiah, in a perplexing decision, permits it. He gives the authorization. The demons enter the animals, and the result is immediate and catastrophic. The approximately 2,000 pigs rush down a steep bank and drown in the sea. The tragedy here is layered. Yes, 2 men were freed from demonic torment, an act of immeasurable spiritual value. But what was the cost? The price of saving 2 souls was the total economic destruction of a community. 2,000 pigs were not just livestock, they were the capital, the future security, and the food supply for countless families. The gospel presents us with a profound moral dilemma. Does the value of 2 tormented human lives justify the annihilation of the livelihoods of hundreds of people? The Jesus who shows compassion for the sick appears indifferent to the economic despair he just created. And the community's response is perhaps the most telling part. The herdsmen run to the city and report what happened, and the entire town, instead of celebrating the men's freedom, comes out to meet Jesus and begs him to leave their region. The greatest miracle of healing that day resulted in the total rejection of the Messiah by the community. The people of Gerasa clearly valued their material stability more than Jesus' presence, but this incident compels us to confront what the kingdom of God truly means. A kingdom that, in order to be established, sometimes requires material losses and sacrifices that we are often unwilling to accept. Jesus demonstrated that where the spiritual and the material collide, the material will be crushed, regardless of the tangible cost to those involved. This act of judgment challenges us to rethink the balance between spiritual salvation and earthly sustenance. We arrive at the action that most fundamentally challenges the conventional image of Jesus' peace and meekness, the cleansing of the temple. This is not a quiet act of power or an allegorical lesson. It is an act of physical force and explosive rage in one of the holiest places in the Jewish world. Jesus enters the temple courtyard, where money changers and animal sellers offered their services to pilgrims. According to John's Gospel, Jesus takes ropes and fashions a whip. He then physically drives everyone out of the temple, along with the sheep and oxen. He overturns the tables of the money changers, scattering their coins across the floor, and commands, "Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise." This is not a sermon. This is an assault on commerce. Here we have Jesus in a frenzy of zeal that destroys property, creates chaos, and uses a weapon, the whip. Envision the scene. A lone man bursts in, flipping over business tables, ruining the livelihoods of multiple men amidst shouts of indignation. If this act were performed today, it would be classified as vandalism and physical intimidation. The theological explanation is clear. Jesus was condemning the corruption of the priesthood and the exploitation of the worshippers. The court of the Gentiles had become a marketplace, and the temple, which should have been a house of prayer for all nations, was turned into a den of thieves. But what, really challenges our perspective is the manner in which he acted. The Jesus who commanded, "If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also," is the same one who wields the whip. This shatters our simplified vision of a passive Messiah. He did not debate the priests, he acted with immediate, destructive force. This display of fury shows us that Jesus' peace has boundaries. His unconditional love is accompanied by a vehement hatred of hypocrisy, injustice, and institutional corruption. This is the side of the Messiah that does not tolerate the desecration of the sacred, and who is willing to use force to restore divine order. This is, without a doubt, the most startling and intensely human of the three destructive acts. It is righteous indignation, yes, but it is fury. And it reminds us that the image of Jesus is far more complex and dangerous than we often allow ourselves to believe. Our deep dive into the Gospels unveils a Jesus of profound complexity, the healer who curses the fig tree, teaching us about judgment and the necessity of fruit, the Savior who sacrifices the sustenance of a community, showing us the radical cost of spiritual freedom, and the Master of Peace, who brandishes the whip in the temple, demonstrating that there is a divine wrath against corruption that must be feared. These are not flaws in the Messiah, but brutal lessons in prophetic performances. They invite us to abandon the simplistic, one-dimensional image of Jesus and confront his totality, a being of infinite love, but also of uncompromising judgment, a being who did not hesitate to use his power to both create and destroy, all in the service of a higher, divine order. The complexity of Jesus of Nazareth is what makes the Gospels so compelling. They challenge us to move past the comfortable stories and face the real Jesus, the controversial master whose actions still echo today, demanding our interpretation and our ultimate submission. We want your opinion. Which of these three actions challenged your understanding the most? The destruction of the fig tree, the economic cost of the 2,000 pigs, or the fury in the temple? Share your analysis in the comments below. Do you believe the church intentionally downplays these sides of Jesus? If you enjoyed this in-depth analysis, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next investigation, the dark and hidden side of the 12 apostles.